Lindsay Halligan is the subject of a bar complaint in Florida about her Florida bar license brought by a group called Campaign for Accountability that they filed back on February the 2nd, 2026. And I think they're onto something. I'm going to read to you from the complaint. But Lindsay Halligan, who was 4 months a inexperienced novice prosecutor with no prosecutorial experience until she was forced to resign and leave the Department of Justice in disgrace after 3 separate federal judges said that she had committed, she was either illegally appointed, made misrepresentations and misstatements in court, and was unethical. Once all that happened, Judge Curry, Judge Novak, Judge Fitzpatrick, all in the Eastern District of Virginia. The issue is, will and which bar, Virginia, Florida, or both, are going to investigate her for having committed these ethical breaches. And Campaign for Accountability had originally filed in Virginia after Judge Curry ruled that she was illegally appointed, Lindsay Halligan, after Judge Fitzpatrick observed that she had violated the 5th and 6th Amendment privileges of at least James Comey in trying to obtain that indictment, and said she's effectively committing prosecutorial malpractice in an unethical way and should be removed. Now, at the time, Virginia, I'm going to focus on Florida, but Virginia said, we can't do anything about it until the court makes a referral, which is untrue. Being a member of the bar, like I am, and being a lawyer, where you take the oath to uphold the state constitution, the U.S. Constitution, to comply with the rules of professional responsibility or conduct. It's self-regulating, yeah? Most states have an integrated bar. Some states do, like the Florida bar. Some states, your law license is regulated by the court system. Either way, you're regulated. You can lose your bar license. It's a privilege to have that license. You have to go to law school generally, take a test, a series of tests, and then get admitted and keep your license current. And you are regulated in all these different areas. Now, Virginia, and you do not have to have a judge make a referral about a bar complaint. Like, I think this lawyer should be investigated. That's one way, but anybody off the street can make a bar complaint, and they look into it. And the bar on its own initiative can do it. Now, let's talk about, since Virginia has decided to sideline itself, let's talk about the Florida bar, that I know well. Florida, when Pam Bondi had a similar bar complaint against her, came out with, we're not going to do anything about Pam Bondi, the Attorney General for the United States, because she's currently in the federal government. She's currently in the Department of Justice. Okay. Well, Lindsay Halligan is no longer in government. She's no longer in the Department of Justice, right? She no longer works there. So there should be no longer a barrier for the Florida bar to bring this investigation. And it's outlined in the Campaign for Accountability's February 2nd letter, which I will post on Legal AF Substack. By the way, I'm running a 35% sale. We already had 300 people join our Legal AF Substack to support independent journalism. Now would be the time for annual membership. The facts that are laid out to the Intake Council focus on Judge Curry, Judge Fitzpatrick, and Judge Novak and their comments about Lindsay Halligan. Judge Curry said she was illegally appointed and everything she did would be invalid, including obtaining an indictment against Letitia James and against James Comey. Judge Novak, which led to Halligan's resignation, said she's impersonating and masquerading as a prosecutor and needed to answer for that, and why she shouldn't be sanctioned by the bar for her false statements about her role. Judge Fitzpatrick, a magistrate judge in the Eastern District of Virginia, said that Lindsay Halligan, not knowing what she's doing, violated the 5th and 6th Amendment privileges of James Comey, at least in things that she said to the grand jury, all showing professional malpractice for a prosecutor in breach of her ethical duties. In other words, she should never have taken the job knowing that she was so inexperienced and incapable of performing the job, whether in private practice or as a prosecutor. So the bar complaint goes through all of these different things that were said. Let me give an example. Judge Fitzpatrick said about Lindsay Halligan, when prosecutorial misconduct before the grand jury prejudices a defendant and threatens the defendant's right to fundamental fairness in the criminal process, a district court may exercise its supervisory authority and dismiss the indictment. That's how bad the level of misconduct was. And Judge Curry, he made the ruling that she's impersonating a U.S. attorney in the Eastern District when she isn't one. And all of the violations of the various ethics rules that have been observed. Now, I know this was sent to the Florida bar as well by Michelle Cuppersmith, the executive director for the Campaign for Accountability. But frankly, I think they have a stronger argument before the Florida bar, because the only thing that the Florida bar was concerned about with Pam Bondi's original ethics charge was that she's still in government, can't do anything. Love to do something about this, but she's still in government. Okay, Florida bar in Tallahassee, Florida. She's no longer, Lindsay Halligan's not in the government. And she has a bar license. And you can't masquerade as a U.S. attorney for months after you were declared to be illegally appointed. You can't sign indictments. You can't participate in process. You can't argue with federal judges and say things that are impertinent and totally ill-mannered in front of a federal judge. You can't violate your ethics about misstatements and false statements. You can't take on cases that you're not qualified for with impunity or immunity or any of it. So it's up to the bar. Look, I'm a proud member of 2 bars, okay, including the Florida bar. Now, the thing that makes being a bar member valuable is that it is properly policed and regulated for ethics breaches, and people are sanctioned if they've violated one of these rules. If I had violated one of these rules in a similar circumstance, I would fully expect and would not be surprised by the Florida bar coming down on me or any other bar where I held a license. And just as a little bit of a tutorial, in order to practice in court, the reason it's called the bar is that there used to be, and there still is, a wooden divider between the public and the dock of the court, the well of the court. Once you cross that bar, it's because you have passed the bar. You are a member of the bar, and you are allowed to therefore represent clients and address the court in that way. So in order to do that, you have to have an underlying state bar license, right? For all the states and the District of Columbia where you practice. And then if you need to practice in another state, you ask for special admission. We call it pro hoc vici. If you need to practice in federal court, you've got to get into the federal bar of that particular state in which you operate, if you're in private practice. If you're a prosecutor, they kind of look the other way, and even though it's not technically right, and let you practice in that courtroom as long as you're a member of some bar somewhere. That's how Lindsay Halligan, with no Virginia experience, I'm sure had never stepped. But think about this. I'm sure Lindsay Halligan had never stepped into the Eastern District of Virginia federal court in her prior practice at all. She was an insurance defense lawyer doing car accident cases and premises liability cases before Donald Trump took a fancy to her. Okay. So now, but they kind of let her practice there. But that means she's then subject to the Virginia bar regulations. Now, maybe they feel attenuated from Lindsay because it's not their problem because she doesn't have a Virginia bar license. But Florida doesn't have that excuse. So the Florida bar, based on the Campaign for Accountability, should open an investigation, especially since Lindsay Halligan is no longer in the Department of Justice, which was the reason the Florida bar didn't investigate Pam Bondi originally. And we'll end it that way on this hot take. All of these lawyers for Donald Trump, who obviously fell asleep during the first Trump administration, with all of the dozens of Trump lawyers who were indicted, convicted, and or got bar grievances against them. They must have forgotten about all of them. I thought that would have taught a lesson to the lawyers, the Todd Blanches, the Pam Bondis, the Stan Woodwards, all these lawyers that are appearing for the Trump administration in court, that they could lose their bar license. It's always at risk. It's always at risk when you're doing things that your boss tells you to do, which ethically you cannot and should not do. I mean, look what happened in the first term. Rudy Giuliani lost 2 bar licenses. Jeff Clark, a bar license. John Eastman, a bar license. Jenna Ellis, sanctioned. Sidney Powell, convicted. You've also got the people that created the part of the false elector certificates. All of these lawyers, bar sanctioned, indicted, convicted, whatever. And the list goes on. And yet this is not served as a parable for the current crop. I remind people, Nixon's attorney general went to jail after Watergate and after the corruption of that administration. And that looked like kindergarten and pikers compared to what we're watching now. So I'll continue to follow what the Florida bar does next. And just to be clear, for the Campaign for Accountability, the proper title for the Florida bar is the Florida Bar. It's an integrated bar, not Florida State Bar, but you have the address right in Tallahassee. And I would just make sure this ends up there with her Florida bar number. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popak. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.